Hello. So, if you're watching this, I guess you're going to change your starter motor. Lucky you. The good news is, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And having watched several YouTube videos and read up on the forums, I was expecting a worse job. Pleasantly surprised. So, that's good. Tool-wise, nothing out of the ordinary. I've got a 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch socket set that I got off eBay years ago, and it did the job absolutely fine. The only two tools that weren't included I did need were an E14 long spanner that I got from Halfords of all places. They just had it on the shelf. This is why I'm a big fan of keeping high street shops open, because without Halfords I would have had to have waited for a day or two to have one delivered. And the other tool I needed was a T45 Torx bit to undo the strut brace that runs across the engine bay of the E60 and E61. It's seen quite a lot of use over the years because my inlet manifold's been off several times, so I'm a bit complacent there, but I do forget that not every toolkit has these in. So they're the two things out of the ordinary you'll need, and also you'll need some penetrating oil to spray on those starter bolts because they were quite stiff at first on mine. And the Halfords release spray, as they call it, did the job great. So I'll keep waffle to a minimum. We'll get on with looking at the job now, and at the end I will talk a bit more about the job in some depth, any issues I found. So yeah, if you're looking to just crack on with the job, let's go. And if you're here sort of looking at the video to get an idea of what's involved, watch it all the way through to the end, because we talk in a little bit more depth there about any issues that you may have. I will quickly say as well, use Real OEM to find the part number for your starter motor, because I believe they vary by year, and also I think they're different between manual and automatic. So Real OEM is a great resource. It'll give you the BMW part number, and your local motor factor can cross-reference that into their catalogues. You can use it if you're using eBay to find the parts, or somewhere like Autodoc. It'll just give you the right part 99% of the time. Real OEM is a very good website, and usually the information is correct, as long as you tell it the right information about your car to start with. So, okay, let's go and have a look at exactly what's involved. Okay, so first of all, you want to check we've got power everywhere there should be. So, got the negative clipped on there, positive here. A little bit low, but yeah, I think the battery's still a bit low after last night. I've got a power supply on the boot, but it's maxed out at 7 amps, just replacing the charge we lost. So we'll try the back of the starter down there. I can get it. That's fine. So what we're going to do next is clip onto the trigger wire, which you can see I've pulled the boot on back there. It'll focus. And we'll see if we get anything from that. Multimeter set up. Keys are in. I mean, I wouldn't panic immediately if nothing happens the first time, because the back of that trigger wire is properly dirty, so you might have to go and give it a wiggle to get good contact. But let's see if we have anything. That's interesting. You can see, if we do it again, it briefly jumps up to the full voltage, but then back down to nothing. Which means we've got a dead starter solenoid, because it's getting power, but nothing's happening. Oh yay! What a fun job this is going to be. And finally, just to confirm the theory, because believe me, there's nothing less that I want to do than change the starter motor. As you can see, it's buried right down there. So it'll be the inlet off again, second time in a week. And a load of other bits and pieces when I get out of the way, just to make the job easier, so we don't put any strain on water pipes, anything else that's basically 15 years old and needs an excuse to fail. We don't really want to upset. So what we've got now is the one wire on the trigger. We've got it going through the multimeter on the 10 amp setting, and what we're going to do is just put positive power to the trigger through the multimeter, and basically this should make it click, do something, the solenoid that is. And as you can see, we get a load of current draw, but nothing happens. So she's solid. We'll do a bit of a post-mortem afterwards, but best go and get a starter motor ordered. So, excusing the state of my boot, it's still in bits from last night's carnage. First things first, disconnect your battery. don't think, oh, I just took it down the side because it'll be fine. I had it once where it reconnected itself halfway through a job because the wire sock came back round. You don't want that, it made a bit of a mess. So what I would do is tuck it down there, so there's no way it can make contact again. Now I've got the battery disconnected, time to start taking the engine bay apart, woohoo! There's 1,000,001 videos on YouTube and everywhere else about all this coming off. So it's basically clips, little 13mm half twist fasteners, bit in the middle, big rubber seal, all pulls off. Take the strut brace off as well. Careful because, well, I'll mention it again when putting it back on, but it bolts into aluminium, so it's really easy to strip the threads if you're a bit too hard on it with your rattly gun or whatever you're using. So yeah, that's about it. Of notes, the first top tip I've got for you is lay it all out nicely in the boot when you're working on it, especially if you're doing it all in the same day, so you don't have to worry about fighting your way into the boot when the battery's disconnected. And secondly, this little bit of rubber trim fits on each side of these trays where the pollen filter goes. Keep the bit of rubber trim with the tray because it's quite hard to sort of work out which side goes where when you're putting it all back together, and it just saves the aggro of going, is it this side? Is it this side? Is it upside down? Just keep it with it. Jobbed. Now I've got all that out of the way. Just basically remove everything you can see in the nicest way possible. Not literally, but it feels like it. So this, disconnect it, pull the connector off there, undo inlet manifold bolts, disconnect the map sensor, and you'll also have to unplug the fuel pressure regulator, I think it is. Rail sensors this end, regulators that end, I can never remember. Yep, unplug that because you won't be able to get to the last bolt on the manifold with it still in. And then manifold off, shuffle around the pipes down here, and you should be able to see a starter motor. But that's wildly optimistic, and I fully anticipate going, where is it? I still can't get to it. Yeah, it's going to be a long evening. So these nuts are what hold the inlet manifold down against the head. On this part you've got the bolts along the top too. So friendly advice, you can see a couple of these nuts look newer than the rest. That's not a coincidence, that's because I have dropped a couple over the years working on this car. Probably had a manifold off about 6 times and I've lost 2. So if you're planning this work, order a couple of spares from BMW. They're about 50p each or 60 cents if you're using Freedom units. And I know you shouldn't lose nuts and it's bad practice and all the rest of it, but to be honest, with the ADHD we got going on here, it's a miracle I can focus on this job long enough to do it in the first place. So I'll take what I can get. Order a couple of spares, save yourself the pain in the backside when you drop one, because if it goes down there, there's all sorts of under tray and little shelves it can sit on, and you're probably not going to see it again. Now you've got those nuts and the bolts out, what you want to do is unplug your map sensor, and you need to just remove this bolt holding the dipstick tube to the inlet manifold. And once you've done that, it should all pull away. Should. Okay, so I've returned after a quick mental health break with a brand not mentioned zesty beverage, and we're back. So what I would do if I was planning ahead to do a job like this is potentially remove this coolant rail, the associated pipe work, and this elbow, and I would change the elbow and I would change O-rings on things as I go. Bit of preventive maintenance, that's all, because I've heard of these leaking sometimes while you're in there. Same if you've got any glow plug codes, now's a great time to do your plugs, or the controller, which is under here somewhere. Access isn't that bad once the manifold's out the way, it's really pretty good. So yep, anything else you sort of fancy doing while you're in there, it's definitely the time to do it. Make a good out of a bad and all that. So starter motor is actually quite accessible now. You can see it down there. Just got to deal with this slightly awkward to get to Torx bolt. And there's another one down there. That looks even more fun. So that's about it. We'll see how it goes. Got my drink for company. Got my green tools. And I've still got my 8 nuts there, which I'm probably going to knock down into the tray under the ECU at some point, but worry about that when it happens. Quite literally, as soon as I ended the last clip, I spotted something else. So you've got a vacuum line that runs from the pump down here, around the back of the engine to the brake booster, all good. However, what I've spotted is this vacuum line teeing off it has been capped off, presumably when the EGR bypass was done, and a screw's been stuck in the end but split the pipe, so that's going to be not sealing. And there's another one that's been bodged with a bolt there too. So going to plug both of those properly before we go any further. This is turning into a very fun job. You're all fed up of seeing this engine bay, but believe me, not as much as I am. So in the end, I disconnected the coolant lines from here, here and here, so I could tuck them out of the way, make a bit more room. As you can see, the starter is now out and you've got this lovely big void to pull it out without straining any pipe connections, that kind of thing. I'll give the sort of connectors a clean before we put it all back together. The two bolts for the starter are there. Both came out pretty easily with some penetrating oil. I tried following a guy on YouTube. His advice was to use a 15mm sort of ratchet spanner thing, and this is a nice angled one from Duratool, but the mechanism couldn't deal with it, so it did a bit of an explode, but never mind. In the end, Halford saved the day, nipped over to our local and grabbed this with an E14 on one end, which is the size used on the starter motor bolts. Went down the back nice and easy, and out she came. But I would spray a lot of penetrating oil or similar all over the bolts before you try and take it out, because they were pretty tight. But interestingly, sometimes I've been told anyway that they suffer with the dowel you can see there sticking in the starter motor. Not an issue on this one because it literally fell off as soon as I started undoing the bolts, so happy days. But yeah, just waiting for the new starter motor to arrive tomorrow, and then back together we go. Over and out. Right, and we're back on day 2. So as you can see now, we have new starter motor, old starter motor which has been cleaned up so I don't get covered in filth every time I touch it, and you can see the marks from where I was hitting it to try and free up the solenoid. So when you're dealing with electrical issues, a really handy thing to have is a bench power supply such as this one, 10 amp up to 30 volts, really good for just testing stuff and mucking about with in general. I've used it for 10 times more things than I ever thought I would. So we're set to 12 volts there, and this is the old starter, and what happens when you put power to it is it throws out, there you go, and it's seized now. You can see, pretty knackered. So I think we're on the right path with the diagnosis. This is the new one, power to the solenoid. Exactly what you'd expect. And it also pulls a bit less current, which is nice. So yeah, something is definitely seized in the original. So we're good to go there. Let's go and get it fitted to the car. Okay, so we didn't get very far there. What I've noticed is the threads in the new starter, they're okay, but they've not been cut particularly cleanly, and there's a bit of swarf in there. So what we're going to do is just run the bolt in and out a couple of times to really clean those threads off. Now if we get the bolt and run it in, nice and easy. Well worth doing, because when you're trying to hold the starter in place and put the bolt in, it's a bit of a pain in the backside. Great news. New starter fitted. I was in a bit of a rush yesterday, so I didn't show you the access on the bolts. I just sort of got on with it and forgot to video. Never mind. I can show you now. So, using our trusty E14, you can see it's a straight spanner. There's no curves or anything. It fits fine. You can get it straight on there. Same with the lower bolt. No problem at all getting it on there. There we go. The only thing that I did find is that using the 10mm ratchet spanner that I accidentally destroyed yesterday trying to undo these bolts makes winding them in a lot easier, especially if you get one with a curved neck like that. So you can just sort of get them in until they're nipped up and then use the E14 just to finish the job. So let's get it all back together. I'm not really going to video much of the next bit because it's the reverse of removal, as they say in the good old Haynes, but should all go back together nicely, and we'll do a bit of a summary at the end. Get in there now, almost back together. Just a little note about putting the inlet manifold back on. Use a torque wrench. Don't do it by feel, you won't get it close enough, and they're pretty sensitive to being done to the correct level. So it's meant to be 10 Newton meters for those. the bolts that is, and the nuts down there are 15 Newton meters. But I normally do 12 Newton meters and 18 Newton meters purely because I'm running just over 40 pounds of boost. So got to keep it held down. But yeah, please don't do it by feel. You won't get it right. You'll have boost leaks. You could strip threads if you go too far the other way because these are only in plastic. So yeah, I may or may not have learnt this the hard way in the past on a different engine. Just spend 20 quid or $25 or whatever it is for a torque wrench from Amazon that's got a calibration certificate, and it'll be a lot closer than just guessing. Okay, yep, the old one may have been on the way out after all. That is a lot quicker turning over. Okay, so we're back, the job's done, the car's running. First and foremost, hands. I have very dirty hands. When doing this, I imagine a few of you watching will have gone, he's not wearing gloves. You'd have been right to say that. I should have worn gloves, and there's a packet of them in the drawer to my right. I don't know why I didn't. It was very silly, and this is going to take quite a few washes to get out, which is my own fault. Talking of cleaning things, the inlet seals and the ports they sit on the big inlet manifold you have to lift off, great time to change the seals and a great time to clean the ports as well. So the seals themselves are 6 round and 6 square seals. They're about £1.50 to £2 each last time I looked, from L-Ring, who I believe were the OE supplier to BMW. So get yourself a set of those, change them while you're in there. They go flat with age, and that leads to boost leaks. If you see oily residue around the inlet manifold, especially underneath, that's probably where it's coming from, because the boosted air contains oil vapor and that just goes everywhere. If for any reason you can't get L-Ring, there are aftermarket options out there, and to be honest, in the past I've used them and they're fine. They do the job. They're not quite as nicely made, but I've never fitted an Amazon set or what have you and thought, oh, this is really, really bad. They tend to do the job okay, as long as you follow the torque figures that I mentioned earlier. And I'll mention it again, which is 10 Newton meters for the row of bolts. They're the 10mm head bolts, and it's 15 Newton meters for the row of nuts. So the 7 nuts that run along the inlet manifold. If you're running slightly higher boost pressures or significantly higher boost pressures as I am, I'm using 12 Newton meters and 18 Newton meters respectively, because I was advised to do that by a specialist, because I just got to keep the boost inside and stop it peeing out everywhere, for lack of a better term. So yeah, if you need to clean those ports up, you'll notice, or you may notice, that the square ports on the head have got either sort of a ring of dried rubber stuck to them. That's come from the square seals. It's quite common. The best thing to do is to plug the hole with a little bit of kitchen roll, or a microfiber, or anything to stop the debris going down into the cylinder head, which you do not want, and just give it a polish up with some really fine wet and dry, and it'll come up lovely. So on to what actually happens with these starter motors. So I got unlucky, and the way mine had failed is apparently the most unusual way, and that's where the solenoid itself just seems to jam solid. So it's pulling about 7 amps when we gave it power directly, but not making any noise at all. And interestingly, I did drop the starter as I took it off the car, and that seems to have freed it up, because on the bench you saw it sort of shot out for a second and then pulled the gear back in immediately, which isn't how it's meant to work, but it's no longer seized solid. So that was interesting. But yeah, seizing solid like that is apparently quite rare. And that's where the solenoid is seized solid, to clarify, not the motor. The motor itself still spins freely. The second sort of most common way for them to fail, I'll go in reverse order for some reason, that is when they start to intermittently work, and you'll press the start button or turn the key depending on the year of your car, and you'll just hear a clunk from the engine bay, and that clunk is the solenoid working to throw the little gear out, but the actual electrical contacts in the solenoid are worn out or pitted, and basically it's not making the electrical circuit complete, so the motor can't spin. That's fairly common. So if you're one of the button pushers or key turners that has to turn it a few times to get the car to start, please think about scheduling this work in sooner rather than later, because you are going to be left stranded at some point. These things don't get better, they get worse, and it's really not that bad of a job. And most commonly by far on the M57, the way these motors fail is they just start spinning slower with time. And that's because the carbon brushes wear away as they're meant to, but this gets into the bearings in the motor, causes more friction, and means that everything just turns slower than it should over time. And it also means the current draw of the motor increases quite drastically, which puts more strain on both the battery and the wiring leading to it, none of which are good. And also the electrical systems in the car, I guess, won't appreciate the voltage dip from the higher load. So it'll just turn slower and slower until it won't have enough oomph to start the car. And again, more likely to happen in winter because batteries produce less cranking amps in winter. Don't leave yourself stranded. Just do it when you can. Even if you have to use a second-hand low mileage motor, I guess that's better than one that's done high miles and is handing in or throwing in the towel. So yeah, we'll do a post-mortem vid on the solenoid. We'll take it apart and find out exactly what's gone wrong because I'm quite curious. What left me stranded 100 miles from home. I've got to say, the AA driver that brought me back, the AA is one of the major recovery companies in the UK. The driver was fantastic, really nice guy. I can imagine they get a lot of stick from people that have been sat waiting, but if you do get recovered, remember it's not his fault. He's just doing his job and he's come as soon as he can. As soon as he drops someone else off, he's there with you. I know it can be hard to remember if you're sat at the side of the road for ages, but I was by myself with no children. I'm a man, shock. So it's one of those things, people that are traveling with children or lone women as well, they tend to register as a higher priority, and rightly so. Also people with medical needs that need to return home for medication, or who are disabled, etc. They all, I believe, rank higher. Again, completely understandable. Just sort of explaining, because a lot of people, when you say you had to wait a few hours for recovery, in this case, maths is failing me. For the guy to turn up, it was about 6 hours, 7 hours. A lot of people go, that's too long. It's really not. It's actually pretty par for the course. You can see these horror stories in newspapers where people have been left waiting a day or two. Just how it is. But yeah, a bit of a tangent there, apologies. But if you don't want to be left waiting for the recovery agent to turn up, keep on top of this, because if you know yours is on the way out, it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. Interestingly, when I'd put the car back together, I found I had a new problem. And that was that the car would spin over on the new starter. Great, we know it works. But no, it wouldn't catch. It was just cranking, no start. And it turns out that all the times I tried to start the car while waiting for the RAC to come, I'd been probing around with the guy's multimeter who turned up to try and diagnose it. We've been probing around while pressing the button to try and work out where power was. It turns out that had caused the EWS to fall out of sync with the key. And it's easily rectified using IMPA. That's the tool I mentioned we talk about a little later in the video. And IMPA is a great bit of software. It's very clunky in the way it works, but when you get your head around it, it's pretty powerful. And for diagnostics, brilliant. So all I had to do was go into the ECU, and there was quite literally a button that says reset, and you can basically marry them up again. It tells the car the key's in there, let's talk to it, let's start. And it did. Fired straight up after that. But there was a moment of panic. I went around and checked all the sensors were plugged back in, sat with my head in my hands for a few minutes, and then I remembered that I've had this problem in the past. So easily solved. And what I will do is a short video on the EWS resync at some point, because I imagine a lot of people who are doing this job have tried to start the car repeatedly, have tried jump starting it, have messed about trying to get the car to run, and they may have the same issue when it comes back. You might just find the car spins over, but just cranks endlessly, but doesn't start. So yeah, we'll do a short bit on that. As I mentioned earlier, while you're in there, those inlet seals are a good example of things to change. Anything else that you know is a problem, change it. So it might be worth, before you go pulling everything apart, to use IMPA to see if there are any issues stored. Even if it's just a small sensor, if it's your glow plugs. I always say, think of the next guy, because the next guy might be you. You might be back in there before you want to be. I had that manifold off last week, and granted, I couldn't have known this was going to happen, but if I had known it was going to be an issue, it would have been great to get in there and sort it. There are things that some of us know we have wrong with our cars and we're choosing to ignore. If it's there in front of you, just do it. It's just easier. It saves you either breaking down or putting up with an engine management light on or intermittent power loss depending on the fault. It's just easier to do it. A little quirk that I found when we were doing this today was the guy who delivered my starter motor. Turns out he used to work at a specialist fixing supplier, and he asked what I was up to. Lovely guy, have a chat with him quite regularly. And I mentioned about the little nuts that frequently fall down into the abyss and are never seen again, and how they were M7. And he said in all his years he's never seen an M7 nut, which I haven't either. It's a really odd size. I don't know why BMW chose M7, because I'm guessing M8 would have fitted in there somehow, but the engineers know better than we do. Who knows, maybe they just want people to buy these nuts that they drop down into their engine bay. I don't know. But he was equally baffled as I was when I first found they were an M7, because when I dropped the first one, I got my little tray of assorted nuts and bolts. None of them went anywhere near it. And that was a weird moment, because it obviously wasn't going to be imperial with it being a BMW. It was going to be a metric measurement. Sure enough, if you look on the real OEM EPC, it says M7 nut. Bizarre. Little bit of trivia for you there, I guess. In total, this job took about an hour to take the car apart. Cleaning things up and doing sort of ancillary work while I was in there was maybe another 15-20 minutes tops, and then an hour to put it all back together. The fiddliest part was getting all those scuttle panels and the pollen filter housings back on in the right order and all that kind of thing. Fiddling with trim is not my favourite thing. I'd much rather have oily hands than be arguing with 15-year-old brittle plastic that's always sharp and, you know, a couple of battle wounds from today. I think they were both from trim. So, yeah, all the joys of older cars, I guess. And finally, when I disconnected the coolant lines, I think I briefly touched earlier on the video, clean up the O-rings and the connector while it's apart, because 15-year-old O-ring, 200,000 miles in this case of dirt sat on the pipe connector, and then you try and push the two back together, might not seal. So clean the O-ring. I put a little bit of silicone spray on a bit of kitchen roll and just clean the inside, and use the same to clean the outside of the stub that it connects to. Just trying to help it reseal, because they're under the inlet manifold and I have had that thing off too many times. I'm done with that. I really don't want to take it off again for quite some time. So that is about it. We'll come back to the EWS reset in another video, because I have a feeling that I'm not the only person that's come across that, but it's very simple to sort. It just made me panic quite a lot. And we'll touch on IMPA and the other stuff it can do at some point, because it's a great bit of software. Annoyingly, mine is stuck in German, and I know you can fix that, and I know there'll be loads of people telling me how to do it. I've looked, I went to do it, and then my brain just wandered off, and it's still in German. But I can speak German to a degree, wunderbar, so I can get by. But it is still annoying having to sort of decipher what a word with 20 letters is, and it's usually just glow plug or something like that. It's a wonderful language, but it's got some long words. So yeah, that's the end. I hope you've enjoyed, and see you in the next one.